Well, welcome everyone, but welcome back. It's been a great conference and a lot more good stuff to come. And I have the great pleasure to introduce our next speaker, the governor of the state of Idaho, Butch Otter. You know, when you look around the country and when you think about what we're all here for, I mean, ultimately it is about the kids. And the progress that most states make when you look around the country is almost, I think literally without exception, there are literally no states that have made substantial progress for those kids in terms of educational reform and progress without a governor who is a true, passionate leader for education. And I got to say, and I've seen this for a lot of years, working with the governor along with Rod and Bob Locken, who's the current chair of IBE, and Andy Scoggin, who's the vice chair, and a lot of us. We've seen it up close, and I got to say, and I honestly don't think the governor gets the credit he deserves for this, that his leadership around this issue is truly outstanding. I think truly one of the best in the nation. You know, we used to say, you know, you could be the education governor of Idaho. This was 9 or 10 years ago. And I would say he is the education governor of Idaho when you look at where his priorities are and where they've been and the kind of progress that we've made. Just to tick off a couple of things, I'll turn it over to Butch, but you know, a couple of comments this morning when Steve Smiley talked about, you know, you don't want to keep changing priorities. You know, it's the flavor of the month. One of the things that the governor has been absolutely steadfast about is that we really needed, maybe for the first time, a strategy that was developed ultimately by all the stakeholders that could look beyond the next legislative session or the next 12 months. And thanks to the governor and a lot of work by a lot of people, through the K-12 task force and a lot of other efforts, we really do have a plan. We have had a plan, and it isn't the flavor of the month, and it's the first time in my memory that this state has had that kind of strategic idea and that vision and a real plan and a real strategy. Rod mentioned this morning, you know, we're all in this together, and I really respect the fact that the governor has been a huge catalyst in bringing a lot of us together, often, you know, not easy, often very complex kinds of issues that ultimately we came together and agreed on. And that's been, I think, really critical to setting a platform in place that now will serve this state extraordinarily well. We can't do anything without, in my view, and the governor felt this truly stronger than anyone, without a real game plan and a strategy, and it had to be something that we all agreed to and co-authored. And so I think that's an important thing just for us to keep in mind. And without that, you can't go on and do some of the things we all talk about doing. You can't, without, you know, Rich mentioned this morning, Rich Ramundi, in his group that, you know, we're here to serve a broader constituency, ethnically, demographically, age, you know, early childhood, kindergarten. You can't do that if you don't have the core game plan, and then you can really broaden that out. That's what, again, the governor has always believed and I think been a huge leader about. Just to give you a very quick couple of, just to make sure we recognize some of the things that have happened in the last several years under the governor's leadership and because of his leadership in so many ways, forming the K-12 task force that I mentioned that led to 21 recommendations that virtually have all been adopted or in various stages of implementation. And how many blue ribbon committees have you all and we all served on, come up with this wonderful bunch of recommendations? It sits on the governor's desk, vaporizes in maybe 20 minutes, never to be seen or heard from again. Well, the governor put together implementation committees, he called them technical committees, that literally herd on the recommendations, the priority recommendations, all the way through the legislature and into execution phase. That was unique, I think. The governor led the 5-year commitment to raise teacher salary. It's the biggest single salary increase for teachers in Idaho's history, funding for the reading intervention to help struggling readers. Governor adopted the mantra that by the fourth grade, you must know how to read, so that from the fourth grade on, you can read to learn. Funding for career and academic advising, a lot of things we've been talking about this morning. Creation of a scholarship for working adults to return to school and finish their degree. The movement to mastery-based education. He also, relating to this whole workforce development task force that he really spearheaded, organized the Workforce Development Council, which of course is a co-sponsor of today's summit, along with the IBE, and increased the state's commitment to career and technical education funding. He created the Higher Ed Task Force, which is in process of implementation, that Linda, who's here, co-chaired along with Bob Locken, who's the co-chair of IBE. He was a key leader. I worked with him on this College of Western Idaho, key leader in the formation of the College of Eastern Idaho. The list goes on, and I don't want to take all the time away from the governor, but I just want to say how proud I am to have had a chance to work with the governor. I think he has made enormous progress. It will serve this state very well for many years to come with the platform that he's been such a key leader in creating. So I'd like to turn over the podium to our governor, Butch Otter.
Thank you, Skip. That was really nice. Well, thank you, Skip. That was great. In fact, I don't believe I've ever had a 6-minute introduction. I could have listened to it all day. In fact, there for a minute I thought I was going to have to. It's been great. It's been great. All the things that we've done, nobody's done themselves. And when Skip kind of started off by saying, but you have the chance to be the education governor, it was, I'd have to tell you, it was a pipe dream for some of us because we knew the conservative nature of the legislature and some of the things that we were going to have to ask for simply maybe not are in the budget, even though that budget gobbles up 48% this year of $3.7 billion. And if you add higher education to it, that consumes almost 60% of our entire state budget. So that's one of the reasons that I believe we need to really pay attention. But let me give you the 3 reasons that I really got involved. First off, a little bit about my background. I was born 8 miles from where I live. I was born in Caldwell. I was one of 9 kids, one of a family of 11. Only 3 of us graduated from high school. Only one of us got a college degree, and that was me. And raised in a family where my dad was a journeyman electrician. In fact, I've spent years with the IBEW, the International Brotherhood of Electrical Workers, and education wasn't a high priority for my dad, nor my mother. But being a good citizen, being successful was. And so in my dad's way of thinking, he said, well, you don't need, unless you're going to be a priest or a nun, I'm Catholic, there's no need to go to college. Well, I thought about trying the nunnery, it's not going to work. They're not going to buy into that. And so in the little part of my heart, probably most of it, which is the black part, that's the reason that my first experience in college was actually in a monastery, studying to be a Benedictine. And when they told me I couldn't be Pope, I said, to hell with this, then I'm out of here. Not quite true. But let's go back just a little bit further. 1958, I quit school. I'm 16 years old. In Idaho, the law says you got to go to school between the ages of 7 and 16. And so like most of my brothers and sisters, at the age of 16, I quit school. And I said, Mom and Dad, I'm going to join the Navy and see the world. I'm so smart. I was 6th in the family. And I'm so smart that, I don't need any more formal education. So I'm going to join the Navy and see the world. 1958, and they said, well, the Navy said, you're only 16, you can't really join, and then if you do, with your parents' signature, until you're 17. So Dad said, fine, you quit school if you want, but you're going to stay home, run the farm and the ranch and the dairy. And the dairy, you know, I thought governor being a 24/7 job for 12 years was tough. If you're milking 84 head of cows every night and every morning, that is tough because there's no day off. There's no delay. There's no tardiness when you're involved in that. So it's a tremendous responsibility. But after a year, I found out that I wasn't as smart as I thought I was. And so, in fact, I couldn't take the feed bill, balance that against the revenue, the milk checks, and figure out whether or not I was making a profit. And so I spent that whole year and decided that maybe I'm not as smart as I thought I was, and I better go back to school. And I better do what I can to bring myself up so that I don't have to milk those 84 head of cows twice a day. And so that's what I did. Unfortunately, I was supposed to leave for the Navy from the Boise Depot, which is south of town, on October 15th of 1959. And fortunately for me, I tried to get back into some public schools, but because it was October, we had already lost little of August, most of September, and the first few days of October of 59, they said, no, not here. Fortunately for me, there was those who didn't give up on me. And it just happened to be St. Teresa's Academy, a Catholic school. And in fact, it's now called Bishop Kelly. Rich runs Bishop Kelly. And so I got in. And I got in like 6 days before I was supposed to leave. And I was committed to leave. But the Navy kept sending me a letter and saying, if you want to go back to school, we'll forget your application. We'll forget your signing up. So I did. Went back to school and finished out and finally graduated in 1962. And let me tell you what an experience that was. First off, I was the tallest kid in class. Second, I was the most popular. I was 20 years old. You could buy beer when you were 20 in those days in Idaho. And so I was very popular, but not very smart. My GPA did not reflect anything, and so it was out of the goodness of their heart at St. Martin's Abbey that they let me into college, and I was actually under academic probation. Well, I spent 3 semesters there, and the rest of the story is I came home, and Boise Junior College had to take me because they were a community college at that time. They couldn't turn me down. And so after a year and a half at Boise Junior College, I then matriculated over to the College of Idaho. And my wife was on academic scholarship. I was on academic probation still. In fact, when I graduated, if my GPA had been expressed in numerical terms instead of alphabetical terms, my GPA would have been akin to the tire pressure on your car, about 35. But what did I learn from that? I learned an awful lot. Later on, after military, the time I spent in the military, I came home, went to the legislature, became the assistant secretary and parliamentarian of the state senate, and then 2 years later, I ran for the state legislature, the House of Representatives, and actually got to serve on the education committee, which, interestingly enough, was the bad boy committee. Nobody wanted to serve on the education committee. But I served for 4 years on the education committee, and I learned some very important things about that. Number one, every parent wants for their child maybe what they didn't have, but what they want is a better life for their child, more success, more contributions from them to their communities. And so that was what every parent wanted, and I learned that very quick. And the best way to get there is cross those educational thresholds, was be smarter than the parents were, be more productive than the parents were, be more informed than the parents were. The second thing I learned is that business needed smart people. So every business entrepreneur, and I knew the giants, Jack Simplot, that built. In fact, I just noticed some of this wood is off of where we used to meet when I was with the company in a potato cellar. And some of this wood came off of that, I would guarantee you. In fact, they already told me the story. I didn't recognize it, but I just thought I'd throw that in. True story. I'll embellish it a little bit, but true story. Anyway, they need smart people. I one time asked Gary Michael when he was the chairman of the board of Albertsons, and I knew Joe Albertson pretty well, and another giant. And I asked Gary Michael when we were opening up a new Albertsons food store out on the corner of Eagle, and I think it was, out in the country. And so I said, Gary, how big is your normal store? He said, 65,000 square feet. And he said, how many SKUs do you have in it? How many different product sizes and everything else? He said, 44,000. And I said, here's the ultimate question. What is the shelf life? What is the marketable shelf life of each of those products? And he said, 18 months. I said, wait a minute. You know, I'm 76 now, but then I said, you know, I'm this old. I'm 50, 55, whatever I was. And I said, Gary, I ate Cheerios. You know, when I was about 10, I think they'd invented them by then. And they're the same Cheerios today. He said, not even close. It's a different package, less salt, less sugar. Something has to change, so that product has to renew itself every 18 months, approximately. But he says, remember this, Butch, some products don't last 6 months. If they're not moving, if I'm not shifting that inventory 6 times a year, I'm losing money by those SKUs taking up products that nobody's buying. So you've got to have smart people to invent the next generation of French fries, the next generation of processing a product, the next generation of engineering, the next generation of innovation, and the ability to operate this whirlwind of magic that we call IT. And so, finally, I would tell you this, that it's been my experience in the 36 years that I've held public office, actually been in office, that we've got a great republic. You know, this country that people seem so dissatisfied with, and it's the very country that protects them in their dissatisfaction, in their frustration with it, and yet they're free to express those things. And so this republic is worth saving. And Ben Franklin probably said it best when he said that a well-educated citizenry is our first line of defense over any form of tyranny. If you can't enslave the mind, you can't enslave the body. And so it's up to us then to take those minds and help them work that magic. Every classroom teacher is the most important thing in our future, is the most important tool in educating the next generation. Because if that teacher at grade 3 has challenged the creative genius that God gave each and every one of those students in that classroom, if they'll challenge that student, and they can challenge that student, then that student is going to turn out okay. I one time heard a story that I want to share with you, and you may have heard it as well, but I like it so well, I like to hear myself tell it. A young child came home from school one day, and the dad had already gotten home and was reading the paper. The child walks in and said, Dad, I saw this picture in this story of the world in this magazine. Would you read it to me? The dad said, you know, I'm busy right now. Let me finish reading the newspaper, and when I'm finished reading the newspaper, then I'll read you the story. And so after just a few seconds, while the young child was back, Dad, can you read this story? So he opened up the book, saw the story, turned the page, didn't turn the page, took but he saw a globe, a picture of the Earth taken by one of our astronauts. And he said, tore that up into pieces, and he gave it to the child. And he said, here, you go put this picture back together. And so the child said, okay. in a matter of seconds, the child was back. And Dad said, how did you do that so quick? And he said, well, Dad, what you didn't realize is there was a picture of a child on the other side of that globe in that same page. And I knew if I put the child together right, the world would turn out okay. And that's kind of where we are. And that's why we labor in this vineyard of opportunity. That as we harvest every May and June, that next wonderful crop of potential, only we can decide if we've watered it, if we've nurtured it at the right time, if we've fertilized it at the right time, if we've done all those things and cared. And then when we got the great crop, we were smart enough to take good care of it. And that's precisely where we are. And so that's why we created a 5-year plan. When I first went to the legislature in 1973, as I said before, I served on the Education Committee. 1973, 74, 75, and 76, we fought over the education budget every year. The teachers are making way too damn much money. They're not making enough. No, they're not doing the right thing. They're not teaching our kids about the right kinds of things. All of these things we argued over. So then in 87, I became lieutenant governor. For 14 years as the president of the Senate, I watched the Senate fight over the education budget every year. Same story, same complaints, same prognosis that we're not going to do any good. We can never give education enough money. And so when Mike Gwartney, Skip Oppenheimer, Walt Minnick was the first IBE group that I initially met with, told me that there was a way that we could really improve the education system of Idaho, but we had to start with the raw material. We couldn't start in the 7th or 8th grade. We couldn't start in the 12th grade and try to decide that we were doing the right thing. In fact, I remember in about 74, we had a little experiment in the Education Committee. We took one building. I don't think it was one school district. And for reading, because just like Skip said, if they're not reading at grade level by the 3rd grade, from then on, they read to learn. And they can cognitively use that process of reading and then application. And so they gave this students in this building, and I think it was 74, 75. And we told the students, okay, you've got your choice in American Lit. You can either read Chaucer's Canterbury Tales, or you can read Popular Mechanics. 40% of the students chose Popular Mechanics. 40% of the students by the end of that year were reading well above grade level. You know why? Because they were interested. They wanted to know how to put together a combined cycle engine. They wanted to know how to do those things. And Chaucer's Canterbury Tales was so esoteric that they couldn't relate that. Now, it's the values that we find in Chaucer that we want to apply to our own life, or we want people to apply to their lives. But in the end, you can only get that attention from things they're interested in, and they will be interested in. That's what we found out by community colleges. Bert and Rick have a new challenge ahead of them. That's the College of Western Idaho and the College of Eastern Idaho. And fortunately for me, I had some agreement from the state legislature, and we got the first $5 million in 2009 was to challenge. Didn't it take 4 school districts in order to make a community college district? So we had to take Canyon and Ada County, and Skip headed that up. And we got the College of Western Idaho created. Only little enough. Now, Rick will argue over this, but that's his problem, because now he's in Eastern Idaho Community College, and he has to build on that reputation. Because Glandon right now, I believe, in my heart of hearts, runs the fastest growing community college in the history of the United States of America. I think we started out with about 1,500 students in 2009, 33,000 today. That tells you a little bit about the pent-up demand, but that also tells you a little bit about the quality of education that some people some students aren't going to want to go to a four-year institution. They're not going to want to have to deal with fraternities and sororities and on-campus or off-campus living and that sort of thing. But community colleges whets their appetite, I believe. It gives them a chance to be involved without, if they want, without being seen. It gives them a chance to succeed without somebody questioning whether or not they can succeed. And so that's why I think community colleges, in fact, I asked Marilyn, I said, Marilyn Whiting, who is my education advisor and deputy chief, is it time to go? Then why are you leaving? Anyway, I'm sorry about that, but bring me back a cup of coffee on the way, would you? Where was I? Oh, why don't we have more community colleges than we have four-year institutions? Why don't we have more portals for the opportunity for the try? Let me just put my toe in the water here a little bit and see if I like it. And after a few credit hours, they find out they really are qualified to do college work because all of a sudden it's something they want to do, not something that some law someplace or some parent somewhere says you have to do. And that's why I believe those additional portals that we've opened up is so important. Let me just say that by the year 20, is it 2020? 2025. We're going to create in Idaho another 105,000 jobs. Isn't that right? Or 150? 105,000 jobs. I'll put it this way, 105,000 jobs. We're going to have to train people up for those. Because I can tell you right now, we're estimating we're 90,000 short. 90,000 short. So who is going to want to, you know what capital wants? Capital wants security and predictability. Security because, they don't want to lose their capital investment. And these companies that are investing in Idaho today, and we've had about as much capitalization as any state per capita, but they're investing here because it's secure. And they know we're not going to change the rules and all of a sudden make business a lot more expensive to participate in Idaho. The other thing they want is predictability. Because if they're going to borrow that money to put into brick and mortar and a job station and new equipment, then they want to be able to tell their banker, their insurance company, their capital resource, how they're going to pay the money back and whether it's not, it's going to be on time. There's nothing more deflating to the future of business than having to go back to that bank, back to that insurance company, or back to that capital resource and say, geez, I was off by 3 years. Because that guy loaned you somebody else's money. It wasn't his money to loan. I mean, it was his money to loan. It was his money to manage. But it wasn't his dollars and cents. He didn't reach in his pocket and give you that $1 million. That happened to be my deposit. That happened to be your deposit in the bank or in the insurance company. And so that's what capital wants. That's what capital needs. And smart people that are highly motivated, that can create that next generation of products. And products, when I say that, I don't mean just French fries and sugar and lumber and those kind of things, but the next engineering feat, the next new processing program, the next level of IT. And so that's why it's important to 1,758,000 stockholders we call citizens of Idaho. And every year, right at 200,000 students that are attend and expect, and their parents expect, and business expects us to work that magic and release that creative genius that will turn every one of them into a producer, a good citizen, a great child, and a great citizen. That's why we do what we do. So don't give up on anybody, because a 20-year-old can't buy beer today. That's it? Questions? Huh? No, I want to answer questions. Thank you. I was supposed to leave time for questions, but I got so caught up in what I was saying, I couldn't shut up. Thank you. Was I supposed to introduce you?
Nope.
No.
Well, good afternoon, everybody. I'm David Etzwiler. I'm the CEO of the Siemens Foundation, and before I get on to thanking the governor and a few other folks, I have to start out by telling you that I have an employee back in Washington, D.C. who manages the relationship that we have with the National Governors Association. She is far and away one of the greatest hires that I've ever had in my career, and each fall I struggle to provide any kind of feedback to her about how she could improve and what could have gone differently this year. This year is different because somehow she managed to get me scheduled immediately following the governor. And this is absolutely the worst place that you want to be jumping up and introducing yourself and providing some remarks. So thank you for that opportunity to provide her feedback, Governor. I do want to begin really by sincerely thanking you and your team here in Idaho. It's my first visit to Idaho ever, which really surprised my son the other day. He said, "Dad, you've been everywhere." I said, "There's a few states here, and Idaho is one that's always been on the list there to try to get to." But I've enjoyed just being here the last 24 hours and bumping in and meeting people and seeing really a gorgeous city, incredibly clean, and really a city that you can tell is on the move along with the rest of the state. So I want to thank you for that, and thank you for the time that we had together just to chat and get to know you a little bit right before lunch ended. So thank you so much for that. I want to thank Wendy Sechrist as well for her tremendous leadership for this conference and so much more. Really indebted to you for what's happening here. It's really quite remarkable. And Dana Westgren and all of our friends at National Governors Association. This is a partnership that we developed about 2, maybe 3 years ago now. It has been nothing short of outstanding in terms of their ability to find just the right people to run these initiatives, to develop them, and really to work with the states to share lessons so that folks can learn from one another, make sure you're learning not only what's worked, but what doesn't work, which too frequently we don't talk about. In the foundation, nonprofit education community, we're really upfront and kind of fast forwarding, I think, with folks on how things can go differently. So I want to thank those folks right from the get-go. And as I said, my name is David Etzwiler. I'm the CEO of the Siemens Foundation, which really means that I get to run a nonprofit with a company with more than 50,000 employees in the U.S. and that are serving the world each and every day in ways that I still find very astounding, through the early detection and treatment of life-threatening diseases, through our health companies, by manufacturing light rails and high-speed electric locomotives that safely and cleanly move millions of people each day from their families and to work and back. They're developing software, manufacturing software, the same software that helped the Mars rover complete its mission, and the list goes on and on and on. It's really a company that I'm incredibly proud to be affiliated with, and it makes what we're doing here that much more important, and I hope in the next couple of minutes you'll come to see why. We are, as I said, proud to partner with NGA to support states like Idaho in expanding work-based learning for young adults, especially in occupations in science, technology, engineering, and math. We launched our workforce development programming in the summer of 2015, committing to a multi-year, multi-million-dollar investment in America's next generation STEM workforce, targeting those careers requiring more than a high school degree, less than a college degree, and strong technical skills. And those STEM technical pathways are accessible for most students, provide limitless opportunities for those individuals, for their families, for our communities, and support regional economies. It is a win-win for all of us. We are convinced of that, and we are at a critical time in our country's history to make sure that those wins happen. We simply must continue to fulfill our promise to one another of opportunity and for all. And the governor and I were talking a little while ago, and we agreed, doesn't matter if you're on the left, doesn't matter if you're on the right. Economic opportunity for all is a building block for this country. And that's a place where we have the pleasure to be working with you and many, many others. We got to get this right. It's important to the Republic, to be sure. That is what motivates us at the Siemens Foundation to invest in states like Idaho to expand work-based learning that brings students, education, and work closer together. And with your work, the dynamic Northwest Corridor is getting even stronger. Washington and Montana were part of the first cohort of states in the NGA Work-Based Learning Academy that we fund. We talked a little bit about the fact we're going to see Governor Bullock tomorrow and pass along some of your ribbing, Governor, when I see him tomorrow. I know that states and governors would never compete with one another, but in the spirit of co-opetition in this corner of the country benefits all of us. There really is something going on here up in the Northwest with all of you of just getting it done when it comes to taking care of youth and making sure that we get these partnerships right. We are thrilled that 3 years after NGA launched this project, we've gone from working with 6 states to 17, and today we're looking forward to learning from all of you. As the philanthropic arm of a major digital healthcare, manufacturing, and energy company here in the United States, I'm often asked, why is Siemens investing in work-based learning and the next generation of workers? Well, when we talked with our board about the importance of work-based learning to provide economic and educational opportunities to America's young people, they got it immediately. As business leaders at Siemens, they understand the value of work-based learning firsthand. From apprenticeships to community college partnerships, Siemens invests in strategies that address its talent needs and strengthen the talent pipeline for others in the sector and in its communities. As a German company, Siemens' roots run deep in apprenticeships. In Germany, Siemens has 10,000 people participating in its apprenticeship programs each and every year, some 10,000 a year. And that's part of what we've done with some of the governors here across the country is take them to Switzerland along with their delegations and to Germany and see how that works and figure out what can be translated back here in the US. It was those experiences and the particular assets Siemens brings to the table and our awareness of the challenges many young adults face in the classroom and the workplace that led us to focus our investments in closing the opportunity gap for young adults in STEM middle skilled careers. The gap between where too many young adults find themselves today and the opportunities possible with STEM middle skilled jobs is simply too wide for any of us to accept. It is an area where we think the Siemens Foundation can and is making a difference. So here we are working with states like you to stand in the gap. Now, when it comes to work-based learning in this country, there's something many of my German colleagues just simply do not understand. Why don't more young people pursue it? Why don't more schools offer it? And why don't more employers participate in it? Those are hard questions to grapple with for my German colleagues who perceive, who perceive work-based learning, particularly apprenticeships, as normal, even prestigious parts of the education continuum, particularly during the transition from skill to work. As a little bit of an aside, our CFO, who just retired last year for the Siemens Foundation, but also for Siemens in the US, was an apprentice himself, never attended former college. We have a CEO of our hard drives division who is in the exact same place, an apprentice, and is now leading hundreds and hundreds of folks, driving change, and a productive part of the company in this economy. So it's very real in this world. These are hard questions to answer, and especially when we know that work-based learning provides the closest connection possible between a student and a real-life experience. It helps students gain an appreciation for the workplace and develop essential professional skills like critical thinking, personal interaction, and the soft skills, including being on time. It builds the increasingly important network between potential employees and employers, and it contributes to a student's academics by reinforcing what's learned in the classroom and providing a context in which to apply those lessons. If you don't like it, you're probably not going to do it well, as the governor said earlier. If you like it, you're going to pursue it, right? Work-based learning represents all of the key principles we know are essential to a successful career development strategy. Public and private partnership engagement, locally driven training to match demand, and contextualizing education within an exciting job a person can envision themselves in. As all of us know, work-based learning too often gets isolated to a lucky few, if it happens at all, or to an apprenticeship, which is terrific, but limited in terms of its availability. So we decided to work with NGA to find out how we could scale effective models at the state level, to see how those models could be integrated into a state's education and training system to provide work-based learning opportunities to more students, and to see how we can change the trend from the exception to the rule. In this state where job growth is on the rise, 2.9%, I think the governor told me earlier, and the labor market continues to tighten, it is more important than ever to plan for the future of Idaho's workforce. When companies are choosing their next location, a skilled labor pool is always at the top of the list. And with friendly competition from surrounding states and others across the country, Idaho can't and isn't affording to sit on the sidelines. So my thanks to Governor Otter's leadership. You're obviously tackling this challenge head on. You have developed an impressive work-based learning continuum to guide local education and business leaders who want to get engaged and find the right starting place for their communities. And for business leaders across the state, I'd like to leave you with a reminder that you are an essential component to Idaho's success in this endeavor. We need you to open your doors for an internship or an apprenticeship, engage with educators about your skills needs, and provide your insight into the talent demands of the future, to provide equipment and resources that mimic the workplace for students and mentor today's young people to be the leaders of tomorrow. As I say all of that, I realize that those of you who are business leaders in the room are probably doing much of that. The more that you can tell your colleagues, talk to your colleagues about it, and talk to them about what it has done for your company, changing the culture, changing your retention rates, all the better. That's all needed. So at the Siemens Foundation, we are excited about the future, and we can't wait to see how Idaho continues to bring all of the pieces together to build a dynamic next generation workforce for this great state. Thank you for having me.